Applied Linguistics Group uploaded this video for BS English students. Dr. Khalid Malik, the founder, has a PhD in Applied Linguistics to Seoul. He taught at many foreign universities with 25 research papers and in a postdoc abroad. He is also an approved PhD supervisor of HEC. Join Applied Linguistics Group at youtube.com/@1966 Pakistani or use a QR code to join our Facebook group at https://www.facebook.com/groups/32913646464149083. BS English, Level, BS 8th Semester Course Code, L408, Introduction to Translation Studies. Question number 16. Translation and interpretation. The origins of interpretation and translation. Interpretation and translation are two different terms that people sometimes use as if they are the same. However, it's easy to spot the difference between the two once we look at the way these words were born. What is translation? Translatio is a Latin word that means carrying across or bringing across. As if you're bringing a text from the source language, or native language, to another. Oxford Dictionary defines translation as the process of changing something that is written or spoken into the target language. Since the origin and the modern definition of translation are quite similar, people generally don't have a hard time understanding the scope of the translator's work. What does a translator do? Professional translators can either communicate written content in their mother tongue or different languages they have expert knowledge in. Usually, a translator specializes in one subject area and possesses thorough knowledge in the industry of their choice, which allows them to convey culturally specific references in the written material in multiple languages using translation memory. Translation memory is a helpful tool for professional translators that simplifies the translation process. It reminds of a database with reference materials, sentences, and phrases in the source language and target language based on the translator's work in the past. When do you need translation services? Translation services are convenient in niche situations, user manuals, instructions, and places where every word matters. In comparison to interpreters, translators have an opportunity to access dictionaries and do linguistic research as they go through the document. Interpreters, however, have to rely on their preliminary notes, adjusting to the speech with minimum delays and refraining from using dictionaries during the assignments. What is interpretation? On the other hand, interpretation is a vague term with a meaning that can change depending on the context. So what does interpret mean? As a broad term, it defines a particular way in which we explain or understand something. This comes from a Latin word interpretati, to explain, expound, or understand. However, the meaning that language service providers intend to deliver is quite different. It is closely connected to another Latin word, interpres, an agent or translator. Interpreting is not just providing an explanation of the spoken content in a native language. Interpreting services are better viewed as the art of paraphrasing a subject matter into target languages. ISO precisely combines the way this word originated with a modern meaning to define interpreting. So if we can provide a concise definition, interpretation can be defined as a way to deliver spoken or signed information from a source language to a target language. The interpreter has to convey both the register and meaning of the source language content. What does an interpreter do? Most interpreters navigate between simultaneous interpreting and consecutive interpreting, demonstrating an amazing linguistic ability to communicate in foreign languages and tailor the speaker's speech to the target audience. Interpreters work either face-to-face or remotely and support the communication process in the public and private sectors. When do you need interpretation services? Interpreting is appealing in conferences, business meetings, and governmental sessions. You can also use it successfully in press conferences, educational meetings, and even church services. Introducing interpretation to any of these gatherings promotes inclusion and diversity among your audience. Considering the multilingualism among event attendees is important. Hearing the speaker talk in multiple languages, including sign language, is the first step toward recognizing the cultural value of languages. Don't be surprised with the variety of the use cases presented above. Professional interpreters work hard to deliver the message in virtually any context regardless of the differences in the subject matter. Key differences between interpretation and translation. The main difference between interpretation and translation is that interpretation deals with real-time spoken language while translation focuses on written content. Let's observe the differences in more detail. Interpretation takes a bit less time for the audience. Regardless of the interpreting mode, interpreters deliver the message in real time. With multiple spoken language interpretation modes available for new customers, interpreting can happen with slight pauses, in consecutive interpreting, or minimal delays, in simultaneous interpretation. While interpreting experts usually deliver interpretation live, they dedicate hours before the event to careful preparation, something that is often left unnoticed by the public. Interpreting is speech-based, and translation is text-based. For example, Language Scientific explains that call centers and customer service could use interpreting. However, they still have written information that needs translation services for their customers. Interpreters help people who need to deliver their messages orally. They sometimes name it as oral translation. Translators, however, help people who need to deliver their written word, such as documents or manuals, into target languages. Interpreting relies on nonverbal cues that are absent in traditional translation. Whether the interpreter interprets a live setting or pre-recorded speech, they have an opportunity to recognize the speaker's nonverbal cues. Think of how voice tone and face mimics can change the perception of the speech in multicultural meetings. Interpreters can grasp individuals' jokes, metaphors, intonation. This way, they can build a closer relationship and create a more intimate connection between the speaker and the audience. Otherwise, they would be separated by a language barrier. The accuracy between translation and interpretation is not the same. Interpreters strive for perfection, but in a real situation, it's quite difficult. Some professional interpreters can leave parts of the original speech out of the target language. Translators, on the other hand, can use their time to look for precise, specific words, and synonyms to increase accuracy. In short, interpreting requires slightly lower precision than translation. Differences in the delivery process in interpretation and translation. An interpreter can do the interpreting on location, by telephone, or online by means of video, and it happens immediately. Translation could happen soon after the original text has been created when in need of a translation on short notice. How does remote simultaneous interpretation work? Remote simultaneous interpreters interpret the speech in their heads and deliver it in the target language instantly. It means that they do it with a minimum delay in a matter of milliseconds. Remote simultaneous interpreting requires immediate comprehension as the original speech continues with no interruptions. Every meeting is different, and remote simultaneous interpreting is just one of the interpretation modes to get your message across. Bottom line, what's better, interpreting or translation? There's no right answer. Though quite different in execution, both interpreting and translation follow the same goal: helping people understand the meaning of the written or spoken word in their target language. Instead of dwelling on the differences between interpretation and translation, we kindly suggest you think about what could be a better fit in your unique situation. Both translation and interpretation enable communication across languages from source to target. Translation deciphers meaning of the written word from one language to another. Interpretation conveys meaning of the spoken word from one language to another. The common thread is language. However, the two professions require very different skills. While the two are often mistakenly interchanged as equivalents, most translators would baffle at the idea of interpreting on the spot and vice versa. Imagine comparing the work of a public speaker with that of a writer. While both work with language, the skills and talents required are very different. Translators must capture the content, style and form of the original text accurately and precisely and then render it into the target language. The process takes time and typically requires several editions. The translator must read the text in the source language, decipher its meaning, then write, rewrite and proofread the content in the target language to ensure the original meaning, style and form are maintained. Depending on the context, the translator may need to apply thorough research and consultation techniques to the work at hand in order to widen his or her understanding of the subject. The final product should be polished, eloquently written and completely free of error. Interpretation is a much more immediate process with no time for second-guessing or wordsmithing. The meaning must be rendered on the spot for both simultaneous and consecutive interpreting modes. With simultaneous interpreting, the interpreter must interpret at the pace of the speaker, meaning that the interpreter must listen to the source language and speak the target language at the same time. With consecutive interpreting, the interpreter must wait for the speaker to finish speaking and then interpret what was said. The interpreter must listen to the target language, take mental or written notes, and then render the information into the target language. Both professions require considerable language skills that are in high demand, particularly in the business, legal and medical fields. Both translators and interpreters are trained in the professional code of ethics, meaning that they are committed to conveying meaning faithfully, accurately and impartially. Translators do the writing. Translators work with the written word, converting text from a source language into a target language. This is far more than replacing one word with another. The translator must also convey the style, tone, and intent of the text, while taking into account differences of culture and dialect. Often, the finished document should read as if it had originally been written in the target language for the target audience. But this is not always the case. Highly specialized content may require the translator to retain elements of the source language culture in the target language translation. A professional translator will have the expertise to know the best approach for the translation. Translators usually work in one direction. Some translators may be able to understand several different source languages, but in general they have just one target language, typically their native language. Good writers in their native languages. Translators not only understand the source language but also write extremely well in the target language. Often specialize by subject areas. Like many professional writers, translators specialize in certain subject areas, such as law, medicine, business, banking, technology, and science. Specialization requires an in-depth knowledge of the subject and its terminology in both the source and target languages. Different methods for establishing fees. Some translators price their work based on the number of words in the source language, others charge by the number of words in the target language. Some base their fees on hourly estimates. When you need a fast turnaround on a translation project, ask the translator if he or she would be willing to work longer hours for an extra fee, frequently called rush charges. Rates vary by specialty and language. Rates also vary by specialty and language. In general, translating a local news article will cost less than a technical document, while an English into Spanish translation will usually cost less than an English into Chinese translation of the same document. Interpreters do the talking. Interpreters work with the spoken word, converting speech from a source language into a target language. This is far more than speaking two languages fluently. The interpreter must also communicate the style and tone of the speaker, while taking into account differences of culture, dialect, and setting. the listeners should hear the interpreted message as if it had been originally spoken in their own language. Interpreters usually work in two directions. Most interpreters work bidirectionally, meaning that an interpreter often works both to and from the target and source languages. Good speakers in their native languages. Interpreters not only understand the source language but also communicate extremely well in the target language. The setting determines the method of interpreting. Simultaneous interpreting. Simultaneous interpreting requires the interpreter to listen and comprehend in one language, source, while simultaneously providing an interpretation in a second language, target. Settings for simultaneous interpreting include court proceedings, international meetings, television news broadcasts, and press conferences. The sessions at the United Nations are the most commonly recognized use of simultaneous interpreting. Consecutive interpreting. Consecutive interpreting requires the interpreter to hear several complete sentences in one language, source, before the speaker stops to allow the interpreter to provide an interpretation in a second language, target. Settings for consecutive interpreting include small meetings, person-to-person communication, and question-and-answer sessions, such as attorney-client interviews and physician-patient encounters. Often specialize by subject areas. Interpreters often specialize in certain subject areas, such as law, medicine, business, banking, technology, science, and literature. Specialization requires an in-depth knowledge of the subject and its terminology in both the source and target languages. One common requirement. To perform effectively and accurately, interpreters must be able to hear the speaker clearly. It is also helpful, and preferable, if the interpreter can see the speaker. Usually paid by the job. Interpreters set their rates by the length of the job, hourly, half-day, or full day. If you need an interpreter for an entire day, be sure to specify whether the day is 7, 8, or more hours. Applied Linguistics Group uploaded this video for BS English students. Dr. Khalid Malik, the founder, has a PhD in Applied Linguistics to Seoul. He taught at many foreign universities with 25 research papers and in a postdoc abroad. He is also an approved PhD supervisor of HEC. Join Applied Linguistics Group at youtube.com/@1966 Pakistani or use a QR code to join our Facebook group at https://www.facebook.com/groups/329136464149083.